Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Yak with Mac. This is the place to be, and you don't want to miss this episode today. This is a place where we want to encourage and inspire all of our leaders out there to be better influencers and just be great leaders. We've got a very, very special edition today. I'm going to introduce our guest in a second. But first, let me give my reminders. Leaders, 15 minutes a day. Mike, that's all we're asking. 15 minutes a day at least to do something that's going to help you develop and be a better leader. Whether it's watching a podcast or listening to one like this, there are so many great ones out there. Reading an article, going on Percipio, our great internal resource. If you've watched our podcast with Desmond last week, there's a lot of great tools that are out there for leaders. So just 15 minutes a day. And you know what? It probably needs to be at least a 6-day thing. You should be having 2 days off, but you probably want to take some time and continue to develop yourself, even in that quiet and downtime. My other quick reminder is Leader Ready. Are you registered? Are you ready to go? If you've just gotten promoted, we know there's been a lot of promotions over the last month coming into the beginning of the year. Get into Leader Ready. The team is waiting with open arms. Liz's team, all of the great leadership trainers all throughout every region are right there. All right, I wanted to get this young man with us today, and I had the pleasure of being on the same team with him for about 2 years. And I think this is a rare special quality. He won't say this, so I'll say it. When you can be a leader among leaders, because each of us on the team back then had, I had 18 direct reports. Mike probably had around the same. All of us had a lot of direct reports and a lot of responsibility for big areas. And it's really special when someone that's a peer steps up and can be a leader among those peers. That's not easy to do. And we know that there's some folks out there watching now that have that same quality. It's a rare quality to have. I learned so much from Mike. Every time something rolled out or something new, he was always asked, hey, could you go ahead and roll this out? So I'm anxious to get his perspective on leadership, some of the things that him and the team is working on. So without further ado, let me introduce the Senior Regional Training Manager for the Great Mid-Atlantic, Mr. Michael Yowell. Welcome, Michael.
Hey,
Good to have you here, man.
that's really nice, Ken.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's jump right in.
Okay.
I know you've got just a really, really interesting career background. Let's hear a little bit about, not a little bit about, walk us through your career journey and what got you to this place right now.
Okay. All right. This is fun. You don't get to talk about yourself very often. I actually graduated with a degree in painting, an art degree from the Art Institute in Kansas City. So, of course, my first job was a retail job, right? Because that's what we had to do then. So I found that I love retail. There's just an energy to that, right? I loved it and spent a lot of years as a store manager. And I'll share what my role was and then what I learned. How's that? Because as a store manager, toughest job that there is, I think I learned how to be scrappy. Right? You learn how to make the most of every opportunity, how to dive in. You just want your store to succeed. You want your people to succeed. And so scrappy is the word that comes to mind. I did get promoted to a district manager. It gave me the chance to move to Chicago. And there I got to lead a lot of stores, right? And so all of a sudden it's a different kind of leadership. Being a DM, I think, was about learning how to leverage the strengths of all my leaders, right? Looking at these groups of people and saying, hey, here's who's good at this, here's who's good at this, right? And how strategic can I be with all those strengths? So as a group now, we succeed. Career progressed, went into training solely and learned a lot there. And ultimately, at this company, this was Williams-Sonoma. We had brands like Pottery Barn, West Elm. I became the director of management development. And that was, Ken, that was my dream job, right? Like that was, driving programs both in the United States, in our corporate offices, but also globally. So at any given time, I found myself facilitating with a French-speaking interpreter in Montreal. right? And when you train, you know this, you go, go, go. Sometimes I forget to breathe when I'm training. So to have to stop and then wait for an interpreter and then go again was really amazing learning experience. I had a new leadership curriculum in Saudi Arabia with folks there, which was interesting because women were not allowed in the workplace. So picture, the dynamics of just all men trying to run a design business in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Um, Biggest challenge, I think, was China. China, we had sourcing offices there. And so I had it was a leader development program in China. And so, I'm going into this new culture. I'm trying to learn all that I can. I'm trying to give all that I can to these leaders. They're directors of these offices. It's complex, it's crazy. And I'm thinking, what is going to make them the savviest leaders? And they're in their world, their biggest challenge was rewriting the book on ethical business practices, because in China it's very challenging. And so, I think what I learned from this director role, whether it was different languages, different cultures, different challenges, was finding that sweet spot, when to train, when to develop. Right. I think the longer we're in this business, we develop empathy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Empathy for our learners. And so I had to be really empathetic to those leaders in China, knowing they got some big dogs to tackle here. They got some big goals. So how can I insert their development and their training at the right time in the right way so it gives them value? Right. And I think we do this in all of the roles I've had, and certainly will continue to do this. Always think like, okay, right time, right place. So I was all over the place at Williams-Sonoma. When it came time to look for the next role, I looked a little closer to home and remembered that Sprint was based back in Kansas. That's where I grew up. That's where I went to school. And so there was an opportunity there to drive the national retail training team, which you referred to. And this is a really interesting business. So national retail, if you don't know, is you're selling Sprint products, or now we have this at T-Mobile, we're selling our products through these big box retailers, right? And we're selling through the Best Buys, through the Apples, the Targets, Costco's, great organizations. But the thing is, they all have different rules, right? They all have different standards. They all have different expectations. And here's the other thing. You're getting results through people that you don't directly manage. So our job, right, national retail training team, was to influence without authority. And so I got to give a shout out to all my former NR trainers. Many of them are here at T-Mobile, and they're just fantastic, because our whole focus was, let's finesse as much development and training as we can so these folks have a chance of going out and motivating and driving results without that clear-cut, authority. So it's a pretty interesting role, and certainly a fun one. And that's, of course, when I met you and the rest of the core training team, and certainly enjoyed spending time with you and loved the extra opportunities that we had to develop. I'll always look for those.
Yeah. Wow.
I was thinking about your question, and for me, I went from Williams-Sonoma, which was a whole different industry, into this industry, and that required a pretty big transformation. And transformation is a theme I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's been, I think it's been keeping me up at night. And so I wanted to know if you'd be okay if I shared some slides. I've got a quick lesson on transformation that I think will be fun.
Just the word for leaders out there is got me excited. Transformation, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Please do. Absolutely.
Let me share some slides here. Make sure I have. Okay, tell me if you can see this all right.
Yep.
Okay, so of course I'm going to talk about high jump, because when Ken brought me on his webcast here, he thought I was going to talk about high jump, but trust me, it's gonna go in the right place, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. So this, what you're seeing on the screen, is high jump back in its sort of original form, and the photos are pretty amazing, right? Like, you've got something called the Eastern Cutoff. This is a great example of the scissor kick. And the whole premise of how the sport was run back then was that you needed to land carefully. So every athlete's style was based off of need, because as you can see here, we're landing on a sand pit. In some cases, it was a gravel pit. It was never this ideal situation. And so the rules dictated the sport. And in 1965, this amazing thing happened. We had transformation, right? They decided to add something called deep foam matting to the sport. Wow. Okay, so all of a sudden, right? There's technology comes into play, and the whole sport embraced this change. And what this allowed for was a much more adventurous landing style. Because now all of a sudden, I don't have to land on my feet. I don't have to land in gravel, for heaven's sakes. I have this pit of this foam, right?
Yeah.
So along comes American athlete, and his name is Dick Fosbury. And Dick Fosbury at the time was a good high jumper. He wasn't the best high jumper, but he was amazing at changing mindset. I think he maybe had the best brain, right? Because he got in here and he looked at the fact that the rules had changed. He thought about how, what had led up to the sport and thought about where it could go. And he completely changed his way of thinking about the high jump. And what he did was originated this new approach called the flop. And it's now known as the Fosbury flop, right?
Okay.
And so his method is what we're used to see now. At the time, though, revolutionary, right? So it basically you run towards the pole and you adjust your final 4 or 5 steps. So you lean into the turn away from the bar, and that lowers your center of gravity, and it allows you when you jump to have a longer time in the air. And when it's done well, your head and your shoulders go over first, like you can see him demonstrating here, backwards over the bar, which had to be terrifying the first time you tried
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
your body follows and sort of rolls over. And you land on your back and your shoulders. And if it was anything but strange to people to watch, it also really freaked people out, right? Because people thought this was too dangerous. He suffered a lot of criticism. People said he was, setting a bad example to young kids out there who were going to try to emulate that. It was pretty bad for a while until 1968, when he won gold in the Olympic Summer Games.
Wow.
So, today the Fosbury flop, man, this is how high jump works, right? And it's amazing to see. It's the dominant style, and again, you see every muscle poised, right, to go over the bar. It's in perfect timing. And for us, it's people in flight, right? You're seeing people in flight. Now, here's what's interesting, okay? And this was a quote from Fosbury. He said, "The problem with something revolutionary like that was that most of the elite athletes had invested so much time in their technique, in those movements, that they didn't want to give those up. They didn't want to change, right? And so they stuck with what they knew."
Yeah.
And so consequently, it took over a decade for the flop to become the dominant style of this sport, which it is now. So think about all those people in that decade who resisted changing, even though the rules had changed, right? They resisted changing their approach to get there. And so, you think about the word transformation, right? It's a completely new approach to getting results. And I think we're sitting there right now as an organization, everybody that's listening to this, right? We've got a change in the rules. Everything about our world and certainly about our business and our business practice is a little bit different. And so if there was ever a time for a change in in style, in approach, in strategy, this is it. And that's what I'm hoping will happen for folks right now. This is a lesson that I share with my team: is rules change, we got to think in a new way, and look what can happen, something beautiful. So did you manage to pull high jump back into a message there?
No, that is amazing. I never knew that there was another way, because I never knew it was called the Fosbury flop,
Yep.
but that's what all we see now.
Yeah.
Think about the leadership and the I hate to say out of the box thinking, because that's one of those expressions I said we could lose, but think of how he must have thought to figure out a better way. And as leaders, well, let me ask you this, Mike, because obviously he took a chance and he went ahead and did it. I see leaders that probably have these great ideas that are swirling in their head, but they don't want to take that step to do it.
Yeah.
How do you take that first step to transform the way he did?
There's a lot of folks out there that work for organizations where trying something new, where failing potentially is a really bad thing. But I think that I can say unequivocally, we're at a company where trying something new, being innovative, and putting that fear of failing aside is encouraged. And so I think that's the organization that we work for. So Ken, I think we owe, all of us, every leader on this call owes it to themselves to say, hey, what could I do different? And it may not be major, right? It cannot be a completely new approach to what you do, but even if it's something small, like changing the way you speak with your team, change the way you motivate your team, your leadership style, a little tweak here, a finesse there to roll with the punches here. I think that's what we need to spend our time doing right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome. So you mentioned that you roll this out to your team.
Yeah.
What have you seen so far? Any impact so far?
My poor team, they get so much little development messages. I think they've grown to like them, but I just, whether I see immediate results or not, I think that they know, right, as their leader, I want them to try new stuff. I'm going to support them if they do. I've been at Timo now for, gosh, about 6 months. So I still have a lot of work to do to help ensure that my team trusts that I've got their backs and that I'm, encouraging every step of the way. So if anything, it accomplished that.
Well, let's stay there for a second, Mike, because you said something that is so important. You're encouraging and fostering an environment of being able to try different things.
Yeah.
So what if I'm that leader out there though, and I might be struggling, and should I be fostering that type of environment, or should we just stick with the plan and hey, we've got to hit our numbers? How do we get to a place where you're at right now, where listen, I've got your back, go out there and really try different things?
Yeah, it's good. I think it's, one step back. Whenever there's an issue with a leader and there's a disconnect, or maybe there's just mediocre results, it doesn't even have to be bad results, just mediocre results, right? If you dig deep and you start asking the questions, what it always comes down to is this common root, which is trust. And you've, I'm sure, talked about trust a lot on your calls and with your people, and I do all the time. It's a first priority for leaders is to demonstrate that there's a high level of trust. And if you have to earn that, you got to take some time to earn it. But once trust is abundant in your partnership with your team, I think, that's when you start to see safe risks happening. That's when you start to see experimentation, which turns into innovation, which can turn into the next best practice, which drives results. So I'd say trust is that thing that leaders should really strive for if they're not feeling comfortable, diving out there and transforming, or at least rolling with the punches as we get them.
But that trust will lead to that transformation for sure.
Absolutely. It's
And so,
price of admission. Yep.
no doubt, no doubt. Well, so
Yeah.
what are one or two practical ways that if I'm a new leader taking over a new team, what are one or two practical ways that I can establish trust?
Hmm. Well, I think trust is a huge core. What is it? What is another one? It's communication. So if you're a new leader that's still trying to develop that trust, I think the first thing you can do is ramp up communication. Weekly touch bases, weekly connects, whatever it takes. So you just get a dialogue going because it's funny. You can ask your team, "What can I do better for you?" And they'll typically say, "Nothing. It's great. Everything's fine." But it's not perfect, right? So what do? You ask again and you ask again. And eventually, if you keep the communication going, you'll start to find out what you need from your team, and that'll develop trust. They'll understand, hey, he really does want to know because he won't stop asking. So I'll tell him, right? That's how we grow. So I think, ramping up the communication is probably step one. And another thing we might do is think creatively what assignments, what jobs, what projects our teams are working on. And if Ken is always used for this, maybe I let him try something new because I trust you, Ken, and I think this might be good for you. Or maybe I elevate a component of the job as a trial. Or gosh, let me seek out every stretch assignment there is, just so I demonstrate over and over and over again that what I want is what's best for you in your career. That's
Wow.
something that seems to come to mind.
Yeah, that is just some outstanding leaders. This is golden here, and that is just some outstanding advice. I'll say, and they're very simple to do, right?
It
Over
is.
communicate, right? And maybe look to try something different, or have someone try something. Get out of that lane a little bit.
That's right.
That is awesome. So let's stay in this place because you've given me so much already.
Okay.
Given the team so much already. Give us about two or three more pieces of advice. We're in 2021 now. The year is starting off rough in the world. There's so many different things, happening. It can be difficult for people to really stay focused these days. So if we think about 2021, what would be two or three things that you would advise leaders to really, really hone in on as you go into this year? What would be Mike Yowell's couple of pieces of advice here?
Um, Well, I think the transformation message is a huge one. And again, I just think about where do I need to change this year as a leader? Like, where can I transform? And again, if there are big things, I mean, we've got folks who are going to get new jobs this year. A lot of people are in new roles, so the transformation for them is obvious. But even that small stuff, what can I do that just tweaks my performance as a leader, that tweaks my support? That can be huge, and that can be transformative to you and your team and the relationship that you have, and ultimately the results that you get, right?
Mhm.
Um, you knew having me on the call, I would talk about change management a little bit. I'm passionate about change management. I think, we've been in the middle of some really obvious change. We've changed, obviously, companies, for some of us colors. We've changed orgs. And there's still a little obvious change happening even right now. But as we go into the remainder of the year for 2021, Ken, I think we're probably going to move into a phase where the change is more subtle. And I caution leaders not to think, oh, sweet, everything's back to normal, because there's still going to be a lot of change happening. There's a lot of shifting that comes from the big changes we've gone through. There's still going to be a lot of shifting, a lot of figuring out, a lot of tweaking. And so I think for leaders, it's not time to take off the empathy hat or, the nurture hat that we've been wearing quite a bit. I think 2021 is still going to be an important time for us to be super empathetic to our people, really good listeners, like we said earlier, really good communicators, because there's a lot still to work through. But hopefully
Yeah.
that'll help. And there's so many change management theories out there, but really when push comes to shove, when people are going through change, it's stressful. Leaders' best approach is just to nurture the heck out of, and you can still drive results. You can still get amazing results, right? We're not going
Wow.
to sacrifice that, but it
Yeah.
certainly is a great way to show up for your people.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I guess my last one is one that I know you love too, is just self-development,
Yeah.
right? We've been through a lot and a lot of change, and I don't know if people's plans to self-develop last year were derailed, might have been a little bit. 2021 could be an excellent year for growth, right? And we have an incredible team at T-Mobile that are going to drive a lot of development objectives. Let's gobble up those things. But then even on top of that, seek out what you want to learn more of, seek out what your passion is. I always encourage my teams, just be as hungry as you can for self-development. I think, as a good New Year's resolution, we probably lost that health and better eating resolution already this year, but man, make self-development a resolution, and we won't go wrong. And that'll lead to getting through the change. That'll lead to transformation too. So how's
Yeah.
that for tying them all up in a little bow?
I'm so tempted to ask one more question because we should just leave it right there, drop the mic, and just go. Right? That
Oh
is
yeah.
just that's just so great. Any resources that staying right there? Any resources that you would recommend for leaders out there? You were great coming up with resources for us
Yeah.
in our old roles. So, what resources that you've come up with today that you might recommend leaders can jump in and take?
Yeah, okay, so I love Percipio. And I know it's been out there for a while. We had it at Sprint, we
Yeah.
had it at Timo. Percipio to me is this amazing place to get the ball going.
Yeah.
Right? You can watch a little video on Percipio that can motivate the heck out of you and takes 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You can dig deeper, you can get whole books, right? But this is a resource that we don't have to pay a ton of money for, which is incredible, right? And usually you do, right? Usually you do have to pay a lot to have access to that. So that for me is a big one, and that usually leads to other things. I'm a book person. I love to read. I love to absorb and take notes. But there's so much now available video wise. There's so much available, on venues like this, that I think, any of that stuff can motivate the heck out of you. And while you're running on the treadmill, if you're listening to a podcast, if you got a horrible commute, right? Figuring out a way to listen to something. That's the kind of stuff that I think just keeps your brain primed for learning. That's all we got to do. If you keep your brain primed to continue to learn, man, you'll find incredible growth. So that's my plug for Percipio. How's that?
Awesome. No, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Oh,
No,
that's
no,
great.
no, no. A lot of
That's
people love
great.
that for
That's
sure.
great.
Yep.
So, would you come back with me maybe a couple of months from now and we could talk some more?
Love to. Anytime.
Okay. All right. That is
Anytime.
fantastic. And guys, don't worry. Everything that Mike said, I'll capture in my notes that I'll put to the side. This will be out on the Learning Podcast really, really soon. And so, Mike, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. What great, great advice. I love the message of transforming trust and all the things that come through that. How inspiring was this, man? Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Ken. I know your job is to inspire leaders, and you're doing that just as well. So thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So this is Kenny and Mike. This is the Yak with Mac, and we will talk to you real soon.
Thanks.